Welcome back to the Deep Dives. I'm Mark Buzz.
And I'm Anna Bugs.
It's great to have you all here with us for another deep dive.
Always a pleasure to be here, Mark.
So for today's topic, we're tackling a question about ant control. And
Okay.
I got to say, I was a little skeptical when I first heard it.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's one of those things that sounds almost too good to be true.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, is cornstarch like actually an effective way to get rid of ants?
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So to really dig into this, we're taking a deep dive into an article from Simple Pest Management called "Is Cornstarch an Effective Ant Killer?"
Okay. Sounds like a good place to start.
Yeah, and even before we get into the specifics of like how cornstarch is supposed to work, I'm kind of curious, like, what are we really trying to achieve with ant control? What's the ultimate goal here?
Right. That's a great question. I think a lot of people tend to just focus on, killing the ants they see.
Yeah.
But the real key is to disrupt the entire colony's life cycle. You got to think bigger picture.
So it's not just about like wiping out the scouts we see. It's about
Exactly.
taking down the whole operation.
Exactly.
Okay.
So with that in mind, let's see how cornstarch measures up.
All right.
So the article explains that cornstarch basically works by suffocating the ants. You mix it with water, it turns into this thick paste. The ants get trapped and, well, they can't breathe.
Huh. So it's kind of a direct attack method?
Yeah, like a sticky trap that can't escape.
But I'm guessing there's got to be more to it than that, right? It can't be that simple.
You're right to be skeptical, Mark.
Okay.
While cornstarch might take out a few worker ants here and there, it's not going to touch the heart of the colony. The queen.
The queen.
Right.
Of course.
She's tucked away, safe and sound, deep in the nest, away from any cornstarch onslaught.
Right. She's protected.
Exactly. Plus, killing a few foraging ants won't really stop new ones from appearing.
Oh, man.
So you're really just dealing with a temporary fix at best, not a long-term solution.
So much for the easy fix.
Right.
But the article does mention a bunch of other DIY methods.
It does.
So what are some of the more effective options that we can try?
Well, one that really stands out is borax bait.
Borax.
Yeah, it's a slow-acting poison that targets the entire colony, including the queen.
Okay, now we're talking.
Uh-huh.
So how does that work? Do the ants not notice that something's wrong with the bait?
That's the clever part.
Okay.
You mix the borax with something that ants find irresistible, like cornmeal or sugar.
Oh, so it's like a Trojan horse kind of thing?
Exactly. The worker ants carry this tasty but deadly mixture back to the nest and unknowingly poison the colony from within.
So we're using their own foraging instincts against them.
Precisely.
That's pretty ingenious.
And it highlights a key principle of effective ant control.
What's that?
Disrupting the colony's life cycle rather than just targeting individual ants.
Right, like we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
Now, besides borax, the article also mentions something called diatomaceous earth.
Yes.
That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's a natural powder made from fossilized algae.
Ah.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Its effectiveness lies in its physical structure, not a chemical poison.
Oh, so it's not like a poison.
Not in the traditional sense, no.
Okay, how does it work then?
So diatomaceous earth is made up of these microscopic abrasive particles, and when ants crawl over it, these particles damage their exoskeletons, causing them to dehydrate and die.
It's like,
It's particularly effective against fire ants and Argentine ants when applied directly to their mounds.
goes like microscopic shards of glass tearing through their armor.
Essentially.
Yikes.
And because it's a physical mode of action, it's less likely that ants will develop a resistance to it compared to chemical pesticides.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right.
So it's like a more sustainable approach in a way?
You could say that.
Okay, so we've got borax bait attacking the colony from within.
Mm-hmm.
We've got diatomaceous earth acting as like a physical barrier.
Right.
What other DIY weapons do we have in our arsenal?
Well, there's baking soda, which, when combined with boric acid and sugar, can disrupt their digestion.
Oh, wow.
And then there are essential oils like peppermint eucalyptus and neem, which act as natural repellents.
Essential oils, huh?
Mm-hmm. You can soak cotton balls in peppermint oil and place them near entry points, or mix eucalyptus oil with water and spray it around doors and windows to create a barrier.
So we're talking like natural sense as a defense mechanism.
Exactly. It's all about being resourceful and understanding the science behind it.
I like it.
And I'm curious,
Yeah.
what about those really stubborn ant problems? The ones where DIY methods just don't seem to cut it.
Right, like when you've tried everything and they just keep coming back.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's when it might be time to call in the professionals.
And speaking of which, if you're enjoying this deep dive and want to learn more, don't forget to follow Simple Pest Management on social media.
Yeah, great point. They've got tons of information and tips on ant control and all sorts of other pest management solutions.
Definitely a great resource.
And, of course, don't forget to follow the deep dive if you're enjoying this episode.
Of course.
Appreciate your support.
Always.
So yeah, back to those tough ant infestations.
Okay.
The article does mention that professional help is sometimes necessary, especially for those larger or recurring ant problems.
It does.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, when do you know it's time to call in the pros?
While DIY methods can be effective for those minor infestations, they might not always be enough.
Yeah.
And that's where professional pest control services Simple Pest Management come in.
Oh, yeah. Shameless plug.
They have the knowledge, the experience, and the tools to tackle even the most challenging ant situations.
Right. They're like the special forces of ant control.
Exactly.
So if you're dealing with a particularly stubborn ant problem, they might be just what you need.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors to discuss when it might be time to call us the pros. All right, so we've talked about a bunch of DIY solutions.
We have.
Some more effective than others. But I'm curious, when does it actually make sense to just call in the professionals?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, try to tackle ant problems themselves, which is admirable.
Right.
But there are definitely situations where professional help is really the best course of action.
Okay, so what kind of situations are we talking about here?
Well, for starters, if you've got a large-scale infestation, especially if it's spread throughout your home, that's usually a sign that you need professional help.
Right.
DIY methods might work for a small trail of ants in your kitchen.
Right.
But if you're seeing ants in multiple rooms or even coming out of the walls, that's a different story.
Yeah, that's a whole other level.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
It's at some point it becomes more of a systemic issue than just a localized problem.
Right.
Another situation where professional help is often needed is when you're dealing with recurring infestations. So if you've tried various DIY methods and the ants keep coming back, it could be that you're not addressing the root cause of the problem.
The root cause, huh?
And that's where the expertise of a professional pest control technician comes in handy.
Okay, so they can kind of diagnose the situation.
Exactly. They can identify the specific type of ant you're dealing with, figure out where they're nesting, and recommend a targeted treatment plan.
So it's not just about spraying everything in sight with insecticide.
Oh, no. It's much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Professional pest control is about understanding ant behavior and biology, identifying their nesting sites, and using targeted treatments to disrupt their life cycle.
Huh. So it's a more holistic approach?
You could say that.
And they might use methods that aren't even available to the average homeowner.
Right, like specialized baits or treatments that target the entire colony.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's they've got the big guns.
Exactly. And that brings me to another important point.
Right.
Prevention.
Oh.
Professional pest control services can help you identify potential problem areas and recommend preventative measures to keep ants from coming back in the future.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about dealing with the current problem.
Yeah.
It's about stopping it from happening.
Así.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about the limitations of cornstarch.
We have.
Explored a range of DIY solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've touched on the benefits of professional help.
Right.
So what are key takeaways for our listeners? What do you want them to remember from all of this?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to ant control.
Right.
It really depends on the severity of the infestation.
Okay.
The type of ant you're dealing with, and your comfort level with DIY methods.
Right. Some people are more hands-on than others.
Exactly.
And knowing when to call in the professionals is crucial.
Absolutely.
They can provide a level of expertise and targeted solutions that most DIY methods just can't match.
Right. And before you even get to that point, there are definitely things you can do to prevent ant infestations in the first place.
Oh, right. Like what?
Simple things like keeping your kitchen clean, sealing up cracks and crevices, and storing food properly can go a long way in preventing ants from taking up residence in your home.
Oh, those are good tips.
And remember, even if you do end up needing professional help, don't be afraid to ask questions and understand the methods they're using.
Right.
A good pest control company will be happy to explain their approach and address any concerns you might have.
Yeah, communication is key.
Absolutely.
Speaking of good pest control companies, let's not forget about our friends at Simple Pest Management.
Of course. They've been a great resource for us in this deep dive.
Yeah.
And we highly recommend checking out their website and social media for more information on ant control and other pest management solutions.
Yes, definitely. They have a wealth of knowledge and experience.
They do.
And they're committed to providing safe and effective solutions for all your pest control needs. Now, you mentioned something earlier that really piqued my interest.
Oh, yeah.
Ants developing resistance to pesticides.
Right.
That sounds a bit concerning.
It can be.
Could you elaborate on that a bit more?
Sure. So, ants are incredibly adaptable creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, they can actually evolve to withstand certain pesticides.
Wow.
Just like bacteria can develop resistance to antibiotics.
Right.
This is often a result of repeated exposure to the same type of pesticide.
So it's like an evolutionary arms race.
Exactly. We develop a pesticide, they evolve to resist it, and we have to come up with something new.
And the cycle continues.
And that's why it's so important to use pesticides judiciously
Okay.
and to vary the methods that we use.
Right.
Relying solely on one type of pesticide can actually accelerate the development of resistance.
Ah, I see. So it's like we're actually contributing to the problem.
In a way, yes.
Wow. Okay. So what are some ways to combat this resistance issue?
Well, one strategy is to rotate different types of pesticides. So this prevents the ants from being exposed to the same chemical repeatedly.
Right.
Another approach is to use integrated pest management techniques, which combine chemical and non-chemical methods to control ant populations.
Okay, so it's like a more balanced approach.
Exactly.
And of course, preventing infestations in the first place can help reduce the need for pesticides altogether.
Absolutely. Prevention is always the best medicine, so to speak.
Right, right. But what about those DIY methods we discussed earlier? Could ants develop resistance to those as well?
That's a fascinating question.
It is.
It's certainly possible, although the mechanisms might be different than with chemical pesticides.
Okay.
If a particular DIY method becomes really widespread, it could create selective pressure favoring ants that can tolerate or avoid it.
Oh, so it's like we're inadvertently training them to be stronger.
In a sense, yes.
Uh-huh.
So we might see a future where even our trusty borax or vinegar sprays lose their effectiveness.
Wow, that's kind of a scary thought.
It is something to consider.
Yeah.
But more research is needed to really understand the long-term evolutionary implications of these DIY ant control methods.
Right, so we're still learning.
Always.
It really highlights this ongoing battle of wits between humans and ants.
It does.
We're constantly trying to outsmart them, and they're constantly evolving to stay one step ahead.
It's a fascinating dynamic.
Speaking of outsmarting them, the article emphasizes the importance of targeting the entire colony,
Yes.
especially the queen.
Right.
Why is that so crucial?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the queen is the reproductive engine of the colony.
Okay.
She's responsible for laying all the eggs
Right.
and ensuring the colony's survival.
So she's like the key to the whole operation.
Exactly. As long as she's alive, and well, she'll keep churning out new ants,
Oh, wow.
no matter how many worker ants we eliminate.
So it's like a hydra, right? You cut off one head and two more grow back.
That's a very apt comparison.
Right.
And that's why simply killing the ants we see isn't enough. We need to disrupt the colony's core, the source of the problem.
Okay.
And that often means targeting the queen.
Okay, and that's where professional pest control services like Simple Pest Management come in.
Exactly. They have the knowledge and tools to identify and eliminate the queen, effectively shutting down the entire colony.
So it's not just about spraying everything in sight with insecticide.
Yeah.
It's a more nuanced approach.
Absolutely. Professional pest control is about understanding ant behavior and biology, identifying their nesting sites, and using targeted treatments to disrupt their life cycle.
Okay, so it's like a detective story.
You could say that.
Uncovering the ants' secrets and using that knowledge against them.
Precisely. And it often involves a combination of approaches.
Okay.
Baiting, spraying, dusting, and even sealing up entry points to prevent future infestations.
So it's a multi-pronged attack, a strategic operation to outsmart those crafty ants.
You got it. And it's an ongoing process requiring vigilance and proactive measures to keep ants at bay.
Wow. Well, after this deep dive, I feel much more equipped to tackle any ant invasion that comes my way.
That's great to hear.
Any final words of wisdom before we wrap up?
I'd say the key takeaway is to be proactive and informed.
Okay.
Understand the nature of the problem,
Mm-hmm.
explore the range of solutions available,
Right.
and don't hesitate to seek professional help when needed.
Great advice.
And always remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to those tiny but mighty creatures we call ants.
Well said.
Yeah.
And on that note, I want to remind our listeners to follow the show and Simple Pest Management on social media for even more ant-fighting knowledge and tips.
You know, Mark, this whole conversation has really got me thinking about the long game.
The long game.
Yeah, like we talked about how ants can develop resistance to pesticides and even how those DIY methods might become less effective over time.
Right. It's like this constant back and forth trying to outsmart these incredibly adaptable creatures.
Exactly. So it makes me wonder, what does the future of ant control even look like? Are we always going to be playing this game of cat and mouse, or is there a more sustainable approach out there?
That's a great question.
Mm.
And honestly, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
But I think it's clear that we need to move beyond simply reacting to infestations.
So more of a proactive approach?
Exactly. We need to focus on prevention, understanding ant behavior, and finding ways to coexist with them, rather than just trying to eradicate them completely.
Coexist. That's an interesting concept. I mean, ants do play a pretty vital role in the ecosystem.
They do. They help aerate the soil, decompose organic matter, and even disperse seeds.
Right. So maybe it's not about completely eliminating them, but more about like managing their populations and keeping them out of our homes.
Right. It's about finding that balance, respecting their role in the natural world, while also protecting our own spaces.
I like that.
Wow, this has really been an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
We've debunked the myth of cornstarch as a miracle cure, explored a whole arsenal of DIY solutions, learned when it's time to call in the professionals, and even pondered the evolutionary future of ant control.
And it all started with one simple question.
Exactly. Just goes to show that sometimes the most basic questions can lead to the most fascinating insights.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this ant venture.
Sounds good.
To our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of ant control. Remember, knowledge is your best weapon in this ongoing battle. Stay curious, stay informed, and don't let those tiny invaders take over your world.
And if you're looking for more expert advice or just want to stay up to date on the latest ant control strategies, don't forget to follow Simple Pest Management on social media.
They're a fantastic resource, and we're grateful for their insights. Until next time, happy ant hunting. And don't forget to like and follow us on social media too. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.